This is a video tutorial for the extra credit component of thematic mapping for class 3. And in this second mapping, if you want to pursue it, we're going to drill down farther than the bundled version that the Census offers through a geodatabase. So in this case, if I really want to get a very particular demographic statistic variable, I can do it through American Fact Finder. And what I need to do is get both the tabular data and the geometry and get that organized. So there's two parts to this. The first part is we need to go to American Fact Finder. We're going to go through a series of steps. In the video here, I'm going to use mean income in the past 12 months as the example. I'm not going to normalize this data. We did that the last video. I'm just going to use one column for the mean income per census tract. Then we're going to select geometries. We're going to go through a process of doing that. Then we're going to do a join on GeoID. And then finally, we're going to talk about making sure that we have correspondence between our tabular data and the actual census data. And there's actually a guide to help us with this, and I'll make sure that I link to the guide. Okay, so to get started, we're going to navigate to American Fact Finder, which is this page, and we're going to be doing an advanced search. So under advanced search, we say show me all, and then we have to do two things. We have to do topics and then geographies to get to the exact data that we want. You can go deeper than that, but we can start with topics. So under topics, I'm going to be doing income, and income's under people. So it's a subset of people. It's income and earnings. And I'm going to be doing households for the demo here. So I click on households. And once I have that done, I can close this. And then I need to go to geographies. So I have the universe of everything that's in incomes, but I haven't specified geographies yet. In this case, we want to do census tracts in New York. What's nice now, once I have this selected, is there's certain geographies that are grayed out that just aren't applicable to this particular data. So that's kind of a nice way to corral yourself to just those geographies that are pertinent to this particular data set. So here I'm going to go to census tract, and then I need to select a state. In this case, it's going to be New York State. Okay, and I'm going to do all tracts within New York. Click on that and say add it to your selection. So we have two queries that's going to get us a specific result. So we close this up. And now, let's see if we can, it's going to give me a subset, and I want this table. I'm looking for the mean income based on the query here. So I click on that, and once I get to the table that I want, it'll show me a preview. And in this case, what I want to do is I just want with earnings. I'm going to skip all the other columns, and I just want to know what the median income of census tracts is across New York State based just on earnings. So there's going to be a margin of error. We can see the margin of error is, it's 7.6. It's kind of high, but that's just for one tract. Other tracts will be smaller, or it might be a little bit larger. So we just want to make sure that we're not mapping the margin of error, that we see the margin of error and we notate it. We might use it for specific purposes if we're doing research with the data beyond just making a thematic map. But in this case, we want to just stick with the estimates. So we're going to download this data, and importantly, we want to use it in spreadsheet or database format, and we don't want to merge the annotations. So we're going to click off that. We can include the descriptive data element names at the top. That's actually can be helpful, and I'll show you how that works. And we say okay. Once this is ready, it'll download, and after the download, we'll go get the geometry. So I download the data, comes down. I'm going to stick it in the desktop here. Okay. So the next thing, once I actually have that data, that tabular data, I need to go get geometry. And we do that through Tiger Census. You'll have a link to this address. We have a couple different versions. We have the Tiger line shape files. This is certainly something we can use. And we also have the cartographic boundary shapefiles, and these should be clipped to a shoreline. They may or may not be. So there's certain ways to clip this if we need to further. So we're going to download our census tracks in this case. So click on census track, and we want to make sure that we're using the same year as our tabular data. So not 2016, but 2015 in this case. We're going to download from New York. And it comes down quickly. Put that on the desktop. Then what I'm going to do now is make a folder for my data. And I'm going to call it NYS for New York State, and then medium income, MI. And I need to unzip these folders. Okay, I'm just going to stick them in there and delete those. Okay, then we need to connect to our data in ArcMap. There it is. And let's bring in the geometry first. So that's going to be the CB tracks comes in. Okay, and importantly, we're in decimal degrees, so we're not projected here, which is okay for this type of mapping. It's okay. And what we want to do now is bring in our tabular data. So we can bring in the tabular data, the CSV for the tabular data, and bring it in, just drop it in. And as we do that, we can open it up. And what's nice here now is that we do have that first column that's annotated, so we can just check to make sure that we're mapping what we think we are. Okay, so I want to be doing median income dollars, and I need to use this column right here. There's much more columns, obviously, and I could do lots of different mapping. What's also really important to realize is that I have what's called a GeoID, which I'm going to join on, GeoID 2. Okay. Before we go too much further, let's stick this table into the default geodatabase, and I'm going to call it, I'll just call it MI, or NYS underscore MI table, and say okay. So get rid of him. And now what I need to do is do a join between my tabular data and the actual geometry itself. So I go to joins and relates, join. Then we need to use the GeoID. Okay, so click on GeoID, and we're going to point to GeoID 2 underneath our tabular data. Keep all records, validate the join, and as we validate it, this is great. We got 4906 of 4906, so it's a perfect one-to-one match. We're good. Now what we need to do is send this out to our default geodatabase to solidify the join. We'll call it New York State underscore MI. I'll just call this geo for geometry and say okay. I'm going to remove the other one before. So this is what I'm mapping on now. So if I open up the attribute table, I can see that I have a join. So here's GeoID 2 and here's GeoID. So those two tables have come together. And now here's all my variables that I want to map. Or in my case, I just want to map one. So the trick here is that as I bring it in via a CSV, the values don't necessarily come in as numbers. And here's the column that I want, which is, I've already written it down. So it's HC02 estimate. It's this column right here. And this column, if we go to properties, it's a string. And that's not going to map, so at least not on quantities. So what I need to do is go to make a new column. So I'm going to add a field and make it a double. And this one I'm going to call NYS MI for median income and say okay. Now I'm going to point it to that column. Come back over here all the way to the end, VO calculator. And now I just want to make sure that I pick the right column. So New York State underscore MI is now a double that's going to map for quantities, and I just need to point it to the original string value, which is going to be this guy. And I'm going to say okay. And hopefully this doesn't throw error. Oh, didn't throw error. So we do have a few nulls here, so let's sort ascend. These nulls, they are not going to map, so there's a few ways to handle that, of course. We could create a new geometry and set out those nulls if we wanted to. Let's click on see where they're at. So these are kind of interspersed all over the state. There's a fair amount actually in the city, which is interesting. And some of these are obvious, like this is going to be Central Park. There's no median income there. So some of these make sense. Other ones may or may not. But yeah, just so you know that those are not going to map when we do this mapping, and you will need to address nulls. And we've talked about that previously, how to do that. We can send that to a value like -9999, and then in our final symbolization, make that particular class called no data. That's one way to handle it. Another way is to pull them out all together and create two separate shapefiles. So one shapefile for nulls, and those nulls just become grays, and the rest of the data set becomes its own universe as its own shapefile. Regardless of how we handle that, let's go ahead and start with our mapping now. So if we go to Properties and go to Quantities, we can now have access to it, whereas before we probably didn't. So we click on this, and now this is the universe based on natural breaks of median incomes. And under the label, we probably want to change around the formatting. So let's bring it down to 2, see what we get. We probably want to have currency too. So this is median income. So let's have it be currency for our label. So we can see up here at my top class, I have these major earners between 250 and 500,000 almost. And let's apply that and see what we got. There it is. As you might expect, a lot of this wealth is housed exclusively in, let's look at Manhattan, Upper East Side, and also a few tracks down in Lower Manhattan area. Interestingly, there's this one right here. That is quite interesting. I'm not sure which one that is. It's in New York County, obviously. And then, of course, we have just north of the city, up in Connecticut, and then also out on Long Island. But those are the big earners at the very top class there. So how you actually handle this mapping now is really up to you. There's quite a story to tell here in the data, and of course, under properties, you have different classification methods. So it's really important to use something like geostatistical analyst to kind of break apart the data distribution itself to understand it better. But we can see just looking at the preview here of the histogram that most of my values seem to be sitting about 62 or 70,000. So that's where the bulk of the median income is sitting. So there's lots of different ways to handle this. We could do it through standard deviations. We could also do equal interval, which probably wouldn't be that appropriate for this. We could also do a quantile. Quantile might be interesting. Let's take a look at that. Okay, so under quantile, we can see that there's actually quite a bit of wealth north of the city. Let's click on a few of these and just see what they are. Rockland County, and we're at 167 for a median income. That's pretty significant. So this tells a different story, obviously. And also Long Island all of a sudden starts to come into play a little bit more based on quantiles. So it's really your responsibility for this final mapping to pick a method that helps you tell the story that you want to tell about your data. In my case, I'm talking about median income. And we certainly know in New York, median income is going to probably be associated with urban areas, and certainly New York City in significant detail. And don't forget, you can also do a manual break. So if you wanted to, let's say we wanted to get rid of all our classes and just have 2. Okay, so under classify, we might want to break this at, let's do a manual. We might break it at 100,000. Gives us, say okay. Apply it. That's not actually what I wanted. Let's try that again. Big. I got too many zeros there. 1 0 0 0 0 0. Yeah, apply it. Okay. So here I'm just breaking for those that are between the bottom class, which is 11,000 and 100,000, and then on up from there. So that helps us actually see very clearly at a manual break of 100,000 the difference between, it's really a difference between rural and urban areas. If we were to drop cities on top of this, we'd see a pretty marked pattern. So in any respect, it's up to you in the extra credit map to, 1, pick the variable that you're interested in, pick the geometry. It doesn't have to be census tract, it doesn't have to be a county, and then also really think about applying a very specific method to the story that you want to tell in your map. And to tell the story of the map, make sure that the legend itself is developed very well, and that your titling and subtitling also really specifies exactly what we're actually seeing in the map.